chill on the mic. It's about to get real. Keep it live, that's right. From Pennsylvania to across the globe, it's time for the Steelers All-Star Show.
Welcome to the Steelers by the Lake podcast. My name is James Strong, joined once again by all of my co-hosts, Cody Tanner, Nick Pretzel, and Jill from Ohio. Folks, how are you doing on this first day of the off-season, Tuesday?
Thumbs down.
Is it me? I was like, is she pointing? Is it what's going on here?
Down. Very bad. Not how I wanted to start a Tuesday. How are you guys?
I mean, it's never fun to lose, but I mean, we're gonna get into it, I'm sure. It's a new year, so there's things to start looking forward to now. No matter what's behind us and what we have to discuss now, there's things to look forward to.
Yeah, I think first off, I'm happy to be back on with you guys, even though it's not the way I wanted it to be with the setup. I feel like I'm the guest on the show now, which is wild. But man, you never want to be happy about a loss, and I don't think any of us are. But there's some, I think, uncomfortable relief of knowing that we're going to be moving on and into a new chapter, and it's going to be rough, and we'll get to it, and we'll see how it is. But I'm doing well. James, how are you?
I'm doing well. Didn't want the postseason to start this early for us, that's for sure. But I think we all had our reservations as to how optimistic we should be going into the postseason, with the offseason the regular season not being quite as crisp as we were hoping for. Unfortunately, some things just don't always work out the way you have planned, and that's just life. But we're going to try to make the most of it. Being someone that was born in 1979 at the end of the era of the original great Steelers, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when the Steelers were just bad. So to me, getting into the playoffs every year isn't as painful as it is for some other folks. But even somebody who grew up watching Bubby Brister as a starting quarterback gets sick of losing in the first round of the playoffs time after time after time. So we're going to get into all that real quick. I'm going to go over some of the pregame stuff just to get it out of the way so we can get into this, talk about the game. Two elevations happened previous to the game. One was cornerback Trey Flowers, the other cornerback Deshaun Jameson. Jameson, the only one of the two getting a helmet. You might think that's a really odd thing. Why elevate him if you're not going to play him? It's because there's no limitation to elevations in the postseason. So you can do 2 per week, and you can do as many as you want through the whole thing. So you might as well bring somebody up just in case somebody tweaks an ankle or a hamstring or something while they're going through warm-ups before the game. So Roman Wilson was inactive. Caleb Johnson inactive. Trey Flowers, even though he was called up, was inactive. Jeremiah Moon, Jack Driscoll, Logan Lee, and then, of course, Will Howard as the third quarterback. Which did mean, once again, all the inactives were healthy scratches, not injured players, which at least is a positive going into the offseason for us. It's a pretty healthy team, and we don't have any significant players coming off of ACLs or any, devastating injuries. Really, I would say the only biggest question mark going into this offseason is how bad is the neck injury with Broderick Jones? Is he going to be able to come back and play next year? We don't know. We're not going to know for months probably on that. So we won't have any answers for you guys on that. But what we are going to have is some answers on what the heck happened in this game and how it ended so poorly in a game that was so close for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I speak for all of us when we thought we had a chance up until, middle, late third quarter, even fourth quarter, you could argue. But I'm just dumbfounded with how you can go into. Obviously, we had that Browns loss near the end of the season before we barely squeaked by the Ravens to get into the playoffs. And it's like, how does a team go from seeming like they're happy to be here and they're grateful for it and they're going to push, the fire Tomlin chance, and we're going to do this for each other. We're going to do this for our coach. And you saw Aaron talk about how close this team was, to fall flat on your face like that on primetime television in the last wild card game of the weekend, it's just demoralizing as a fan, let alone, I can't imagine how the players feel. You got to imagine a lot of these guys, especially Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, even Aaron, feels somewhat responsible for this being the end of an era with Mike Tomlin. And we'll get to that. But wow, just wow.
I agree with you, Cody, and you can especially say that about Cam Hayward because there was a interview with him. I don't know if it was from today or post game, but they asked him about about the coaching and everything, and he goes, I'm not going to listen to any of that noise. He says, like, all you reporters, all you media, you don't know what Coach T does for us behind the scenes, the way he looks out for individual guys. We always talked about how he was a player's coach and how players wanted to play for him, and that drew a lot of people into Pittsburgh. And so, I mean, this team really was a sort of happy-go-lucky team, a team that was happy to be together, a team that was happy to play together. You didn't see a lot of those on the field back and forths that we see a lot of times. Like, would Aaron get upset with his receivers sometimes? Sure. But it wasn't ever an out of place or like you didn't feel like there were the same locker room issues that you have seen in a lot of the past years. And so for a fact, like Cam even said, so much of it you're going to try to pin it on the coaching, but as a coach doesn't go out there and execute those plays. And we've talked about that on this show. Cam talked about it in that interview, and he said, the players just got to go out there and play, and they got to play better. And that's what Cam said. So I really do agree with you on that these players, Aaron came to Pittsburgh because of Coach Tomlin. You saw the interaction between the two of them after the championship game where Tomlin said, "Thanks for being here." Aaron said, "Thanks for bringing me here," that kind of thing. So it's definitely the end of an era, and it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts the team moving forward and it's almost, I know we're going to get to it later, but it's almost impossible to talk about this game and how it ended without bringing that conversation in at least a little bit. I'm sure we'll get to it more, but it's impossible to talk about this team, this game, this season, because this is the end of the season for us. And I know we'll have more postseason shows, but I'm being a little bit selfish here because I'm most likely not going to be able to make the next show, so I'm bringing some of my thoughts in here. But yeah, definitely a hard discussion to have without bringing those elements in.
Yeah.
Jill?
I lost my voice from last night screaming at this TV. It's an emotional way to end a season. You were hoping for a victory, and to have it end the way that it did, in such a drastic way that it did, was kind of what you were saying, Cody, just really demoralizing. I mean, watching them hold on for as long as they were, and doing a pretty good job of containing that Texans defense. And then our defense was just gassed at the end of the game, so they couldn't keep it together, which is what led to some of those scores. And I mean, two of the defensive scores, we were gassed all around, and it looked like at that point we had given up, which is really sad because, if I almost wonder, and you can do a lot of what ifs, but what if they had known? This is Coach's last game. I feel like when we talked about a couple weeks ago with the turnaround that we saw after all of Acrisure Stadium is chanting "Boo Mike," fire Mike Tomlin, and booing Renegade, and then all of a sudden you see the team do a 180. We got to figure this out because we're getting booed at our own field, and they're chanting to them to fire our coach. We gotta play better. And so part of me wonders if they had known this was his last game, would they have tried a little bit more? A lot of what ifs, a lot of speculation that we could probably spend hours assuming, but we know what happens when you assume. So,
yeah, it's a frustrating experience, especially for folks like us who don't just watch the games, but we really dive into it. We kind of break down plays, and we have a whole group chat where we talk back and forth about what went wrong on plays. Like, this guy missed a block on this play. This guy, looks like he gave up on his route. This guy bit on a fake and got smoked because of it. And it was just over and over. They refer to it as popcorning. It wasn't it wasn't just one guy screwing one thing up. It was now this guy's screwing that up, and now this guy's doing it, and it's just like, oh my God, man. It's just a frustrating thing because, like, to me, one of the most frustrating parts about this game was the protection for Aaron Rodgers was good most of the season, and it just kind of fell apart in this game.
Yeah.
And it wasn't aided by some play calls early on and an insistence to do a lot of screens and quick game stuff that was all to the outside where the defenders had just open reign to run and gang tackle to the ball carriers very quickly with no ability to get any blockers out in front. And when they did try to set up blockers, guys just stood there and waited for defenders to come to them instead of going and getting their block, which led to guys just going straight to the ball carriers and making plays. So just a frustrating overall experience in the game. I felt like we only had a couple of guys that we're going to be able to talk about in a positive light from this game. And not that there weren't more guys that had good games. I think there's going to be some people that fly under the radar in this game, like Zach Frazier. I don't think Zach Frazier had a bad game at all. I think Zach was good. But Troy Fautanu, I think, put up probably his worst game of the season. And that's a horrific timing. I would say most of this season, Troy Fautanu has just been lights out. He's been shutting out people that he goes against. He's not even allowing pressures most games. But he struggled against Aiden Hutchinson, did allow a sack against him. And then in this game, going against Donnell Hunter, who had 15 sacks on the year. He's one of the premier pass rushers in the entire NFL. Donnell gave him fits all game long, man. And you gotta have a plan, and it sucks because I feel like part of this plan was just, and we're going to get into a lot more of this come Saturday's show and more through the off season. But the injury to Darnell was just devastating because he was such an important part of this plan and helping the offensive tackles and pass protection. And John, who just is an atrocious blocker, he can't fill that role at all. So then that sticks you in a situation where the only tight end that you've got on the roster that can help in pass protection is Pat Freiermuth, and he's the most important one to be throwing the ball to. So there just seems like there's a lot of revamping that needs to be done on this roster to be in a better situation so that you're not one injury away from your entire game plan going to crap. So, yeah. There's going to be a lot of talk on that we're going to have in this offseason on what went right and what went wrong in this team building to get to that point. Because for every one decision that was made that I think ended up turning very, very poorly, like, say, for example, the cornerback from the Eagles that we picked up that we get rid of halfway through the year, then you got the flip side of it and you pick up Kenny Gainwell for $1.7 million and he has a tremendous season for you. So it's kind of a little bit of well, you nailed this one, but you completely whiffed on that one.
Well, and the thing I think about that too is that seems to be the norm. I mean, outside of Joe Hayden, you aren't picking up these older guys who were big names and they weren't really doing anything. You look at the Patrick Petersons, you look at the Darius Slays. They thought they had one where it hit and they thought they could keep doing it and it just didn't really work out. So, I mean, hopefully with the change in regime here, we'll see hopefully a bit less of going after these big name guys who are past their prime and expecting them to do. I mean, you even saw it with Jalen Ramsey. Like you bring him in and originally expect him to play corner for you. That doesn't work out. Luckily it does at safety, but you bring in these big name guys to do the big name things that they were doing in their prime when they're aging, and it doesn't pan out. Luckily, Gainwell turned out to be a hidden gem, but he wasn't one of those big name guys you expected to be a stud. He was let's bring a guy in, and holy crap, it worked out. So like, it was a frustrating thing to see that happen over and over and over again. And hopefully we see a little bit less of that now that there's going to be a different crew in. Not to say Tomlin was a bad coach. 19 winning seasons, never having a losing season, a Super Bowl, he's going to go down as a great coach in NFL history. He was a great coach. But at a certain point in time, it's probably time to move on from what you're doing when both sides need a bit of a change of pace. So Tomlin has stepped away from football, which I mean I know we'll get into furthermore later on, but he'll probably come back. He didn't retire, so we'll see what happens there. But just another thing I wanted to bring up when you brought that point up, James, like the Gainwell was a great hit, but you didn't expect that one to be a hit. You expected all the ones that didn't hit to be the hit. So
Yeah.
it's just a frustrating thing to see have happens time and time again, and hopefully we can get away from that.
Well, and I think the unfortunate part is I feel like they truly only brought, in my personal opinion, I feel like they only truly brought one guy in, whether it was free agency or trading, to really be a game. Actually, no, two. Let me clarify, two. To really be a game wrecker and to change the way that our team operated. And both were on offense. I think one was DK, although the trade of George Pickens kind of was a 1-for-1 in potential productivity, and turned out George Pickens had, I think, a better year this year than DK did. And then number two would have been Jonnu Smith. And I thought everyone expected Jonnu to come in and be a phenomenal, tight end one, arguably wide receiver 2 or 3. And the man forgot how to play football all year long. And it just got worse. It felt like in this game, even missing blocks, not knowing where to look for when he's getting thrown the ball, getting thrown the ball for a screenplay and not understanding how to read his blocks and make a decision and move. I mean, it was one thing after another. And because when you talk about Darius Slay, like, yes, we got rid of him. I don't think he was on a major deal.
10 million.
Okay, so more than ideal. But like Jalen Ramsey, even Kenneth Gainwell, a lot of these guys I felt like came in to be accent pieces. Now, Jalen, luckily, I think it was obviously a good thing for multiple reasons that he switched over to safety, and he played very well in that position. But I don't think any of these guys, other than the two mentioned, were brought in to like drastically change something. They did their part, they did their role, and they played fairly well. But it sucks when you see them bring these two guys in, and the game that both these guys had, DK and Jonnu, DK with the wide open passes just dropping, hitting him right in both hands. It's like just frustrating from an aspect of, we brought you in for this moment. We gave you a 4-time quarterback for this moment, and nothing.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that in the earlier games in the season where DK is like 50-50 with his hands. We signed up for that. And so for him to do what he did in this past game, although was infuriating, was not shocking. I'm like, he's good for at least 1 or 2 drop passes every single game, and everybody's like, yes, it was great to have him back. But at the same time, I'm like, well, it's 50-50 when we throw it right to him. So to me, I'm like, you're no better on the field than you are off the field if you're going to drop a ball that's literally thrown right to you. Your whole entire job is to catch that ball. That's it. Catch it. And twice he couldn't do that. I'm like, I wish I got paid to just not do my job.
Half the time, right?
Half the time, right? Like, I'll just not educate,
And
the children of America. But anyway, like, it's just, again, not to say like we liked having him back on the field. It was definitely, his presence was felt on the field. But then I feel like we had done such good jobs of making adjustments where we saw necessary, more so than we've seen in the past, with things like Darius Slay, where we, actually cut it and we're like, we're done. Moving Ramsey to safety, that was a great idea. Becoming a team that does better in the third quarter than in the first half. I don't know the last time I saw that in the Steelers. It's normally the opposite. We're worse because we don't adjust. And so to actually see us make adjustments in personnel, but then for this game to just see 0 adjustments. And again, with Jonnu, it's been the same thing all season. He cannot block. He cannot receive. And the 4 to 5 times, that's a random number, but like the few times that he rushed, we're like, oh, that was cool, maybe. And then that was it. So I'm like, why do we keep going to him again and again in this past game when we know it's not going to work? When we know Muth has the best hands. I was so livid last night. I was just like, how many targets? We're in the third quarter. How many targets did Muth have at that point? Big fat zero. Big fat zero. And I'm pretty sure Calvin Austin had no targets at that point either. So I was like, what? It's the third quarter. How about we try something different? And
I know Calvin had one because it was the one that got hit in the head.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Still, one. Okay, great.
To Cody's point earlier, it felt reminiscent of the Brown game, the Browns game, because this team, or perhaps the coordinator or whatever it was, we did not know how to deal with effective pass rushers. When the pass rushers were solid, I mean, outside of like the game in Detroit against Aiden Hutchinson, we did a pretty solid job there. But when it was Myles Garrett, when it was Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, I mean, to be fair, we were down Darnell Washington, which was the plan. But you can't just have one guy be the plan. I mean, when you have the league's best edge rushing duo, you're gonna have to figure something out. It's not going to be pretty all game. You're going to probably let up some sacks, but you have to have a plan that's not just dump it behind the line of scrimmage all game and hope that somebody makes a play and that everybody makes their blocks. Because we already knew Jonnu wasn't. Like, when he was out there, the effort was just not there. Like, forget the not being able to block. He just wasn't even trying. And like Cody said, completely lost on the route, looking around like, where's the ball going to come from? I don't know, maybe the quarterback who's got it in his hands and is in pretty much the same spot the whole game, because he's not really escaping the pocket too much either. So, I mean, it's not – for Jonnu, it wasn't even – like, I'll give DK some slack, because when I'm off my job for 2 weeks, I come back and I'm like, what's going on? So, like, you have a little bit of a break there and you feel a bit behind.
Let me ask the question. Can you give him a break knowing that the suspension was still his fault? Does he deserve a break?
Should he have done it? No. I mean, no. Does he deserve a break? No. But
okay.
I can understand why the play would drop after being
That's
off.
fair. Okay, I get what you're saying.
So yeah,
and I think you have to look at the whole picture here too. Is that he started the game off red hot. It was obvious they couldn't cover him. He beat his defender on both of the dropped passes, and then on another option later on in the game, which I believe ended up the play where Aaron Rodgers was sacked in the fumble and all that. He had his guy absolutely torched, and that's where Aaron was going.
Yeah.
Just he didn't get enough protection to be able to launch it to him. So I think the game that DK had is a little bit misconstrued as a little worse than it actually was off of those two drop passes when honestly I thought that he just had those cornerbacks outclassed, which is saying something because Stingley's thought of as a top 5, top 10 corner in this entire league. So I'm willing to absolutely give him a pass on this because he at least blocks on run plays, which we never saw out of George Pickens at all other than maybe once or twice a game. The rest of the run plays he always took off. So to me, it's what do you do in the future now? You made your mistake. You came back. He's far from the worst player on the field in this game. So he wasn't even the worst player on offense. There's probably 3 or 4 guys that were worse than him in this game on the offense, including both tackles, I think, in this one. But, yeah, Jonnu is just a failed experiment, and I'm hoping with the backlash of what we see from this. I mean, Nick kind of already hinted at it. We've seen that Mike Tomlin has moved on and decided he's no longer going to be the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. 99% of the time, that means all coordinators are canned afterwards. I think the only one that's going to make any of us sad about is that means no more Danny Smith, most likely. So, yeah, you didn't think about that, did you?
I didn't process that, no.
I was just hoping he'd stay.
Yeah, usually everybody gets fired. So
hopefully the Rainies retain Danny Smith.
Right. Pittsburgh, let's sign a petition.
That part sucks.
Well, and like here's the one glimmer of hope on the Danny Smith thing that I'll throw out there. One of the names that's been tossed around as one of the primary guys to replace Tomlin is Brian Flores because he has connections to the organization already. He's seen the system. He's a younger guy, defensive coach. Now, it would be a bit of a shift from what the Rooneys have done before and going for a guy that's not had a position before, a head coaching position before. But if Flores comes in and says, "I like what you did, Danny Smith, you're sticking around," that would be the one glimmer of hope I would hope for in that situation.
Yeah, and I wouldn't think that Flores would not be an option, just because, like, if you look back at Mike Tomlin, he was a defensive backs coach, and then Bill Cowher, I think, was a linebackers coach before getting the head coaching position. So you can easily look at almost any candidate that comes in and say they could possibly win this job. To me, I'm just excited about the fact that there should be a large turnover in a lot of areas on this roster. You know, with Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, there was an obsession with tight ends, but each tight end was like a completely different role, which could be a good thing. But if one of them goes down, then the other guys can't fill that role. Mm-hmm. And Jonnu Smith never fit any kind of role. His best role was, as you guys mentioned previously, as a running back, which is just embarrassing as your receiving tight end. And then when Darnell Washington went down, you really had nobody to throw in that role. And that's partially to blame for just how you assembled the roster. A 300-pound tight end, a good multi-purpose tight end, a receiving-only tight end who ended up not being a good receiver, and then a tiny little guy who pretends to be a tight end, but is just an undersized.
He does a good quarterback job on 4th and 1.
And that ended up his biggest asset over the season, is Connor did an excellent job on the tush push.
And if James Conner goes down, who the heck are you going to put there? Calvin Austin?
I mean, good thing I guess we didn't get to that point, but they also didn't even use that once in this game, right?
To your receiving tight end point, our receiving tight end for this game had 2 receptions for -1 yard. Yeah,
embarrassing.
Yeah.
And to me, it was on him, the -1, because he wasn't decisive. Mm-hmm. He'd catch the ball, and it was like he was sitting there with a controller in his hand, and somebody blindfolded him, and he didn't know which way he was supposed to go. Like, bro, you're not blindfolded, just go. Like, sometimes just going is better than sitting around and trying to make a decision. Yeah. And even when he did finally make a decision, like the one time they had this screenplay set up to him on the left, there's 2 blockers in front of him, and he goes directly into the defensive lineman. It's a defensive tackle. This is like a 320-pound man, and he runs right into him instead of behind his blockers, which would have had a whole caravan opened up for him on the left-hand side. So it's just, I don't understand how this man caught 88 balls and went to the Pro Bowl last year, because we saw a completely different football player on the field this year. And I'm very hopeful that with the turnover that we expect to happen, Jonnu Smith will no longer be a part of this team in 2026.
Cut it. Platter.
Also, it looks to be a good year to draft a tight end, just saying.
True. Before we get too far into the turnover and transition things that are going on, let's rotate back to this game and go through our normal setup of, let's talk quarterback first. Aaron Rodgers, by far not his best game. I think all of us would agree with that. 17 of 33 for 146 yards and 1 interception. Sacked 4 times for 36 yards lost. I don't think any of us would necessarily blame that on him. Like you said, James, this is probably the offensive line as a whole, and especially those 2 tackles, is probably their worst game of their career. And it's unfortunate when it happened. But I feel like Aaron Rodgers, a lot of miscues I think he was happening with the passing game was due to, again, lack of protection, lack of comfortability in the pocket to step up and throw. And then 2, some receivers were dropping balls like DK. Calvin Austin had, unfortunately, you throw into a 5'9" receiver that's covered by a 6-foot cornerback, and the corner tips it, and Calvin still almost makes a play on it. And then Jonnu, we already talked about that. So not the best game from Aaron, unfortunately. Potentially his last NFL pass goes down as a pick 6. So that'll be interesting. We also don't believe, I know James doesn't believe this. I don't believe this. I don't know where these 2 stand. I don't think he'll be back next year now that Tomlin's gone. So
No.
Unfortunate.
No, I think
Yeah.
that was the only reason he came to Pittsburgh is because of his respect for Mike Tomlin. And there was a very serious mutual respect between those two. And yeah, I think we're going to see some serious turnover in this wide receiver room too. I wouldn't be surprised if the only returning people from this current roster are DK Metcalf and Roman Wilson. I would not be surprised if everybody else is gone because it's not working. Too much deficiency in one area or another. Honestly, the only other guy out of the entire crew that I'd be okay with coming back is Adam Thielen because I felt like he played pretty darn good football once he came to Pittsburgh. But he's like 35, so I don't know what the point is of that.
Please bring back Skoranek. Please.
Calvin
Right.
Skoranek's a given. He's a starter on special teams. He's not going anywhere. I think he signed a 2-year deal anyway. But Calvin's a frustrating one to me because in this game, he had an opportunity on a go ball where he just kind of like let up. He stopped running. And he let the defender come up onto his backside and overtake him for the ball as if he was trying to get a pass interference penalty rather than going and making the catch. And the ball ends up dropping a few yards in front of him, but he very clearly let off the gas. And, bro, you ran a 4.33 There's nobody on that secondary that can run with you if you just open it up and go. Mm-hmm. So I really don't understand what he was trying to accomplish by slowing down on that one. But the end result's not surprising when you do that. So just a very frustrating year. This was Calvin's opportunity to break out this year. And instead, what do you get, like 30 catches on the season? That's just – and he didn't even have a dynamic impact on punt returns either. We saw his best return get broken in one attempt by Scotty Miller.
31 catches on the year.
31 catches in 17 games. That's just that doesn't cut it, man. And I know he didn't have a crap load of targets, but it wasn't good enough as far as what he did with it.
Calvin Austin, you are a Baltimore Raven. But for now, I'm just calling it now. They wanted to get him originally. We'll see what actually happens. But for now, he was part of a very disappointing wide receiver core. If we want to move there next, I think that might be a natural transition.
Yeah.
Not really anybody overly impressive. DK, even with his 2 drops, led receivers with 42 yards, 2 receptions on 5 targets. MVS and Kenneth Gainwell then tied with 26 yards, although Gainwell did it on 4 catches. Valdez-Scantling did it on 3. Adam Thielen right behind with 2 for 25. Muth with 1 for 18. Terrible. Calvin Austin with 3 for 8. Jalen Warren 1 for 4. And Jonnu, the receiving tight end Smith, with 2 for -1.
Yeah, and since we were talking about absolutely atrocious blocking earlier, let's throw MVS in this. Marquez Valdez-Scantling multiple times in this game, just not getting his assignment. And again, he's one of the ones I'm talking about when I'm talking about an offensive skill player sitting there waiting for a defender to come to him to make the block instead of going and getting your guy. That's how you open up lanes, and it makes it really easy for the defender to go make the play. And he did that over and over, not just in this game, but during this season. And I think Pittsburgh, if they're going to continue with this kind of mentality, and most teams like to throw some wide receiver screens from time to time, maybe not as many as Pittsburgh threw this year, but you got to have some wide receivers with the size and tenacity to go get somebody. So you can't have Calvin Austin as a lead blocker on any kind of screenplay, and you can't have guys with the heart of Marquez Valdez-Scantling doing it either, because he made it very clear that he didn't want to, and that's not acceptable, man.
Yeah, him and Jonnu, they were in great company. They just didn't want to be there.
Yep.
So nice.
And that's it's mutual. We don't want them there either. So they can go ahead and find new employment on 31 other teams, and I'm cool with it.
Bye-bye.
Don't let the door hit you where the
on the way out
splits you.
Oh, man.
But I don't know if there's anything else we really need to talk about on the wide receiver core. The running backs tried to give us hope throughout this game, just didn't have a whole lot of open lanes when it came to running the ball. I felt like Pittsburgh really struggled to move these defensive linemen, which is crazy to me because they ran a nickel defense almost this entire game, which means they only had 2 true defensive linemen out there. Mm-hmm. The edge rushers were the other 2 defensive linemen, and these are not huge dudes. Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, what are they? Maybe, I don't think either one of them is over 260. I mean, Cody can check their weight on it if he'd like to fact check.
It looks like Nick's over there.
But I want to say that these are guys that are in that like 250, 255 range.
Remind me who we're talking about.
Danielle Hunter or Will Anderson. If either one of them's over, it's probably Danielle.
Will Anderson is 6'4" and 243 pounds.
Yeah. And Hunter, I'm guessing, is bigger than that because he's a vet and he's been in the weight room for longer. But I'll be surprised if
6'5", 263.
Yeah, there you go. That size of defensive end, your offensive tackles should maul in the run game. Any of your offensive linemen, if they get one-on-one with a dude that they've got 60 to 80 pounds on, they should be putting them on their backside on every play, and you should be able to run off tackle every freaking play. And instead, there's guys shooting gaps and hitting our running backs behind the line of scrimmage on every play. So just a complete failure on being able to dominate the line like they should have been able to. This wasn't a team that ran out here with a 380-pound nose tackle against us. They slapped their regular defensive tackles out there and said, I think our 2 D tackles can beat your 3 interior guys, and they did for the most part. Yeah, they did for the most part, and that's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like our O-line's actually been doing a great job this past season. So to watch that performance, to watch Dylan Cook get bullied.
Yeah.
I was like, does he even know which way's up? What I would keep watching. I'm like, which way's up, buddy? I don't know. You don't know. But to just watch them get absolutely bullied in the trenches was pitiful when that's not how they've been playing for the majority of the season.
Yeah, I think this is the first game Dylan Cook looked like the 4th string left tackle. And I'll give him credit. He had one play where he had an awesome pass block on Will Anderson. He did a snatch and trap where when the guy's coming into your chest, you kind of grab them by the shoulder pads and pull them down on their face and then jump on them. And he did it perfectly, but the pressure from the other side forced Aaron Rodgers right into him and he tripped over him. So the one play that Dylan Cook perfectly executes something that he was taught technique-wise and completely shuts down, what was it, a number 2 overall pick in Will Anderson, or was he the number 1 overall pick? It was one of those. He was a super high pick. Like, perfect execution on that one play, but it didn't matter because the other guys got beat so badly on the play.
Yeah.
So, yeah, tough one there, but this is the first time in the last month and a half that I've thought, man, I really hope Broderick Jones is good to go for next year.
Stroud was 2, Anderson was 3. Yeah, Stroud was 2, Anderson was 3.
I remember they traded back up to get him, but I wasn't sure if it was 2 or 3.
I was curious too, James, when you mentioned our offensive line being beat by the smaller edge rushers. 3 of the 8 tackles for loss that this team put down on us on tape, one of them was Kamari Lassiter and 2 of them were Jalen Petrie. Those are not screens. Those guys are smaller. You get Petrie's 6 foot tall and 196 pounds. Kamari Lassiter is also 6 foot tall, 186 pounds.
Yeah,
they're crashing
beating us in these screen games. They're crashing against the run.
Right, so they're crashing down the field, but it's just a frustrating thing when you have these smaller, quicker guys that Jalen Warren should I don't know who those were on. Maybe it was
MVS and Jonnu.
Right.
Those were wide receiver screens that got blown up.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Because if it's Jalen Warren or Kenyon Gainwell, you figure they're going around him or muscling through him or something. But yeah,
and this is where I'm going to bounce just for a minute. We're finishing up talking about this offense, and this is where I get to the point where I feel like I have to call out the coaching because, yes, we went through a difficult season of losing Darnell and then realizing Jonnu can't block or catch. And that was a thing that wasn't a surprise. It's been happening all year.
I was like, we
Let's
knew
quit.
that before Darnell went down.
Yes. But I guess my point is, like, I feel like good coaches, let me clarify. I feel like half decent coaches that I've seen in the NFL in these situations do things out of the box. They come up with different ways to be creative and to do things and to kind of keep defenses on their toes when something happens or a player goes down that really takes away one aspect of the game that we've developed all year. All right, let's go to the drawing board. Let's spend a whole week figuring out another way to do this or something different to do to still have a solid performance of football, at least like on the offensive side, especially. And I feel like we didn't do that. Like even the creativity we talked about with the tush push. Yeah, we saw a couple handoffs instead of the pushes, and that was good. And that was fun to see. But like, why is Aaron Rodgers in there if he's just going to stand there, if we're never going to use him to throw the ball? There were so many things that I saw that we kept doing or were doing with like, oh, we could do something else out of this situation. And there was nothing else. There was never a surprise. We have more than what you've seen on tape. And I feel like that's what makes great coaches and that's what makes great teams that go push deep into playoffs and have these good playoff runs. We saw we were struggling in the first half. And it's like, I almost feel like the mentality was, okay, it's a close game. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. No, what we're doing got us 6 points. We need to get in the end zone, do something different. So that's where my frustration comes from the offensive coordinator coaching side of the ball. And then obviously my brain also says, okay, the head coach can also step up and say, hey, you got to do something different. And whether that happened or not, I don't know. That's beyond conversation now. But I was really frustrated with the coaching in this game and how I feel like we weren't creative. Nothing was creative. Nothing was fun. Nothing was exciting or out of the box. It was very, okay, we're doing this again. Okay, we're trying that again, and things aren't working. Stop. Get Jonnu out of the game completely.
Yeah. And I think a little bit of that is attributed as well to what James mentioned earlier of not having the same type of guy back up another guy, because you lose your Isaac Seumalo's and then you don't have your Spencer Andersons to do what Spencer Anderson does on that type of play. You lose your Darnell Washington and you have your Jonnu Smith not able to do anything. And like you said, Cody, like we put Aaron Rodgers out there on that play. You figure that would be for eventually a pitch back to him to throw a shot to somebody, but that
motion
never
him out. Someone's
happened.
got to go with him. Like
right. like do something with him. Get some sort of creative. And we saw some variation of that play, the Spartan, but it wasn't ever really like you figure they trot Aaron Rodgers out there every play to use him at some point, but it didn't ever really seem to happen.
If you threw out of that formation one time, the defense would always have to be prepared for that.
And honestly, I think that was coming because the last time we saw them use this multiple times in a game was when we saw Connor take one and keep it go off to the right. When he did that, Aaron Rodgers bootlegged off to the left. So they were starting to build to that point. They just didn't want to show that too early. But the problem is they didn't play well enough to get to a situation where they could actually use it in the playoffs. So that's
too little, too late.
Like is it correlation or causation kind of question there?
Yeah.
Like, because you do have to be more creative. One of my biggest frustrations this season is, you see from time to time other people use, and Kenny Gainwell's a fun, interesting matchup, right? It ended up being the chess piece that we were hoping Jonnu Smith was going to be. Gainwell was that mismatch versus linebackers and sometimes safeties and corners as well. This game, Aaron Rodgers made it very clear that he was trying to get him matched up with Henry To'oTo'o, which did work a couple of times. That was their run-stopping middle linebacker. Obviously, our pass-catching running back, that's a good matchup. What I didn't like is that he kept on running out-breaking routes. I wanted to see an in-breaking route. There's an angle route that running backs run where it looks like you're running an out pattern kind of at an angle, and then you cut it at a 45-degree and go 45 degrees over the middle. It smokes middle linebackers every time because they're typically coming from inside of you, so they're charging as hard as they can to try to beat you to the flat, and now all of a sudden you're cutting back inside them. sometimes they call it a jerk route because it makes the linebacker look like a jerk.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that get run once all year.
That was
That
seen
would
in
have
the
been
famous.
such an easy cheat code to get easy free yards over the middle, that 5 to 8 yard play that we were lacking so frequently. That could have been it. And it just wasn't in the repertoire for some reason. And that's a failure on Arthur Smith's part. That's something that if you're going to be that heavy into certain players, if you're going to want to use that guy, why are you not using a play like that is such a successful weapon for a receiving running back?
Yep. On to the defensive side of the ball.
Where I think we had a couple of guys had good games on this side of the ball. Some of the defensive linemen did show some spine from time to time through this game. I'll give the 3 starters credit. We got some tackles out of Bent. We got some tackles out of Harmon. Cam Hayward got injured early in this game, and I feel like he wasn't 100%, but he did get some run stops, and he did show as stout as he has been all season. The problem came with just any time the ball didn't go near these 3, the run plays were successful. The run defense in this game was just not good. And it was run plays getting given up all over the place, to the left, to the right, to the middle, off guard, off tackle. Like, take your pick. We just got beat. And it was basically, if your name wasn't Patrick Queen, you weren't making a tackle as a middle linebacker. So not good enough out of Malik Harrison. And that's what he was brought in to do. He was supposed to be the replacement for Elandon Roberts, 3-4 years younger than Roberts and a run stuffer. This was supposed to be a move in the right direction, and he was parallel at best, if not a worse run stopper. So I'm not so sure I understand the point of that one. You might as well at least put the faster guy in Peyton Wilson out there. And at one stretch they did that, and then they went away from it late in the game, and that's when it kind of broke open. So frustrating to me. The players are there. Are we putting them in the right positions? It's really possible that the best middle linebacker on this team is not playing middle linebacker right now. That's Nick Herbig.
Yep.
It's very possible that he is the best middle linebacker on this team, and he doesn't play that position unless he's blitzing from there.
I want to make it very clear that I think the defense played well for a good portion of this game.
For three
quarters.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I don't put the fourth quarter on the defense. I put the fourth quarter on the offense because the defense had to go out there and play great for 3 quarters. And we had 79 tackles to their 61. Our defense had to go out there and show up all game. And Cam was hurt. And, TJ was there, but, it's just, you see all these – we have these guys that are out there, and sure, there's the one play where was it Duggar that got beat for the touchdown, or was it Clark? I don't remember. But other than that, we played a really solid game on defense. We just got gassed when they're out there having to perform for a whole game, and the offense just turns the ball over. And I mean, not that they turned the ball over repeatedly, and sometimes it was a punt, so it wasn't. But when you're doing the 3-and-out thing that we've seen so many times before, and I see Jill grimacing because she and I are probably thinking the same thing right about now. But we do the 3-and-out thing. We have, and the offense, 2 or 3 of the touchdowns are on the offense.
Yeah, because
so,
there were tons of touchdowns.
Yeah, so it's not. I don't blame this game on the defense at all. They were out there playing their hearts out. And the offense just couldn't get going. And, yeah, Houston has a staunch defense, but you got to be able to take advantage of things, and it just never materialized.
Well, and not capitalizing on the turnovers that the defense gave you was absolutely abysmal.
Yeah.
Pathetic. Like, you just watch them play stellar football, and then you march onto the field and do nothing. Nope. No, not for me.
What you got, Cody?
I'm looking real quick. So 9:32. So on 3 turnovers, the offense was able to move the ball 32 yards with those 3 turnovers.
Yeah, which is atrocious.
Great.
Atrocious. The defense set the offense up in good position. I mean, one of those is they gave him the ball midfield. Y.A. Black caught that ball out of midair, and whether it's a forced fumble or an interception, take your pick. I don't really care, but great play by Jack Sawyer on one part, great play by Y.A. Black on the other part to catch it before it hits the ground and take all question out of it. Rule it however you want. It's Pittsburgh ball either way, and then they don't even get a first down on it. Like,
we went 5 yards on that drive.
Yeah, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
Johnny Smith.
And
a great play by Sawyer on that too, because if Stroud gets that ball out normally, that's probably a touchdown to Knoll.
Yeah.
And Sawyer was one of the guys that I felt didn't have as much splash as I was hoping for in his rookie year. But to see him continue to trend upward is a promising thing, to have young guys on the roster, especially with a new coach coming in that can be here for a while, that can continue to grow, that can continue to contribute. And hopefully we get a coach who can develop these guys, or a coordinator who can develop these guys, depending on whether we get an offensive or defensive minded head coach, to be able to have some of these younger guys be able to continue to grow and learn and excel. Seeing Y.A. Black do what he did this year, seeing Derek Harmon do what he did this year, especially because some of these older guys, now that Tomlin's gone, you got to wonder, are they contemplating retirement? Are they going to be traded with a changing of the guard? Like, there's going to be a lot of things we're going to be talking about to start the offseason. That's going to be, what's this team going to look like next year? And it's more likely than not going to look very different, not just from a personnel standpoint in terms of coaching, but from a player standpoint as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it should, right? It should, because you can't expect to march out the same base 40 to 45 guys with 7 new rookies and have a drastically different team. So if we want better results, we've got to have a big turnover on this roster. But, yeah, I agree with you on Jack Sawyer, Nick. I felt like he looked the part this year. The big thing you usually worry about with pass rushers when you draft young guys, especially if it's not like a first, second, or third round dude, is how are you going to play against the run? And Jack was stout against the run all season. He's got the size and frame already. He's probably got a little bit of work to do as far as like hand fighting skills and pass rushing moves, but that's stuff that can be developed. You know, do you have the size and the frame to be able to hold up against offensive tackles versus the run? Sawyer's done that pretty well, I felt, all season. We got to work on a little bit of stuff here and there with him. One of the touchdowns that they gave up to Christian Kirk, Kirk came from the left side all the way over to the right, runs right by Sawyer, which it's not his responsibility, but he does let him pass right on through. The defender that was trailing was way too far behind to be able to get there, and it's an easy touchdown. Again, not Jack Sawyer's responsibility to do anything to this guy as he comes around. But it reminded me of Spider-Man, right? Step aside. This guy's not my problem. You, the criminal that's robbing this business, you're not my problem. Well, guess what? Uncle Ben's dead now.
Well, guess what? Mike Tomlin's fired now.
You left your guys hanging to dry. All you had to do was throw a forearm into him, and he can't run his route because he's planted on his butt. You know, you have to look out for each other and not have the mentality of it's not my guy, it's not my problem. And I'm not saying that that's the mentality that Jack had on this, but I'm hoping that this is used as a teaching moment for him of, hey, anytime you can reroute a wide receiver, do it. Especially if you can do it within the legality of the field. Within 5 yards, if a linebacker can chuck a wide receiver, you're not just going to slow him down. You're going to completely screw up the timing, and it would have given the trailing defender enough time to catch up and make the play.
To your point, James, that's exactly what happened on the interception that Echols got. Is Ramsey interrupted the route. Stroud was off his game, threw a bad pass. Echols intercepts it. So your point was proven further by a more veteran defender in this game.
That play Uncle Ben lives.
I was gonna say somebody check on Ben Roethlisberger, because Jack Sawyer's letting wide receivers go right past him. Our Uncle Ben needs to be okay.
But that's what team play is all about, right? You got to have each other's back and help each other on their responsibilities when you can. If you can give your teammate an advantage on a play and not go out of your own way really to even do it and not screw up your own responsibility, that's how you have teams that are extremely successful. And he's a young guy. He'll learn that stuff.
And I'm gonna do what I've been doing a lot. And I know I'm not going to speak for anybody, but maybe James will disagree or someone else will disagree with me and talk about it. Let's talk about it. But I feel like that's a coaching thing. I feel like those veterans have been in the league long enough. Now, let me clarify, whether coached up by other players or coached up by the coaching staff, of that should be discussed every week in film of like, make sure we're chipping these guys when you get an opportunity. Make sure we're messing up their rhythm, their timing. And I feel like if that's hammered into me in practice, I'm not forgetting that. That's the chance I get, especially as a backup who doesn't get as much playing time. Like that's going to be in the forefront of my head. Like I'm going to chip this guy and hopefully someone else can make a move. Now, maybe it is discussed or maybe it's not. But I feel like that just needs to be talked about more, maybe in film or in practice or whatever.
So
Because
I'll be the
it's
voice
such
of
a normal. Go for it.
Yeah. Just to jump in, I agree with the sentiment, but that film was created in this game, so the coaching moment would have to come after this game. Which I mean, like he let the guy by in this game, so he can't be coached on something he hasn't done yet. So now he'll probably get that coaching, but there's not the opportunity to be coached on something that has yet to happen. So the next coach, that's going to be his problem now. But when you have a rookie, I mean, he's a rookie, so it's his first. Now maybe he had something happen like that in college, but in terms of what we've got to work with now, he's going to have to learn that moving forward. And since the moving forward is now on the responsibility of a different guy, hopefully it happens, but it might not happen until it happens again.
Well, he'll definitely listen to the podcast, so he'll hear it. Like, oh, yeah.
Listen to Coach Cody. He's got you, Jack.
I should have done that. I will now remember that forever. So
I feel like Captain Jack is the kind of guy that's going to learn from those things pretty quickly, though. I don't think that just because he didn't chuck that receiver, he's some crappy player. No, that's not it at all. Like he gives 100% effort out there. And my guess is when he sees on tape that he could have possibly rerouted that guy, he's going to feel worse about it than anybody else could deter on to him, So beyond what we've talked about, I think we absolutely have to talk about Joey Porter Jr. He was absolutely lights out and basically completely shut down Nico Collins. He had 3 catches for 21 yards on the day. And multiple times Joey Porter Jr. jumping in there and breaking up passes. He just blanketed him, and I know he didn't get a chance to play the whole game because he got a concussion on one play. But Joey was absolutely lights out in this game, and in my opinion, the best defender on the field in this game. So I am beyond thrilled with what he put on tape this year. He didn't get beat for a touchdown once, not the whole season. And he was like one of the top 5 corners in the entire league.
What?
Do it.
To JPJ.
There we go. There's got to be some positivity in here.
There's the LaCroix for all the people who are just listening.
The biggest bright spot on the defense, in no doubt, in my opinion, in this game. But as bright as JPJ was, I felt like Brandon Echols, other than that interception, just kept on getting toasted play after play after play. His matchup versus Christian Kirk was just horrible for him. And I don't know if he wasn't 100% healthy off of that groin injury he was coming back from or what. But, in previous games when you couldn't use Echols out there, you'd switch Ramsey. But obviously when we took Ramsey out of safety, that didn't go well. So I understand the hesitancy of moving Ramsey off of safety. But just, it stinks because Pittsburgh in the last 2 years made such a big effort to try to trade for these guys to get a solid number 2. Last year, Christian Kirk was the guy. They were ready to trade for him, and then he broke his arm right before the trade deadline, and the trade didn't go through because of it. This year, the big target was rumored to be Jacoby Myers. And Jacoby ends up having a huge impact for the Jaguars. Gets a huge contract extension because of it. They were unable to make that deal. The Jaguars do. And they get the benefit of it. So you got to find your number 2 wide receiver. Pittsburgh's been trying, but for whatever reason, most likely they just didn't want to give up enough trade capital or players that the other team wanted or whatever. They've not been able to get that high value number 2 guy. And you got to wonder if that played into Christian Kirk's mentality on this game, knowing that the Steelers wanted to trade for him and tried to trade for him and possibly didn't give up as much as what he felt his value was. If maybe that didn't make him really want to torch them, because boy, did he ever. It was just big play after big play from Kirk.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything about how the coaching staff should have made an adjustment on that.
I just don't think there's anybody left.
But you not saying it is saying it, Cody.
Yeah.
There's no one left to put on him is the problem.
Yeah. And the lucky thing about us being kind of corner needy is that this year is a pretty deep corner group for the draft. So hopefully with it being in Pittsburgh, they're doing extra due diligence on the prospects and having a lot of those third round picks, whether they can use that to move up to get the guy they're looking for or just find a good value guy on day two. We'll be doing some more off-season work soon coming up, and draft season is one of my favorite times of the year, mainly because we haven't had any postseason success for multiple years. But I love the draft. I'm excited to start talking about it here soon. So I'm excited to get more into that conversation because while this might not be the best year for certain needs, if the con artist can cook in the ways that he has in the draft in the past, it should be a pretty fun time for us coming up here, despite the way this season ended.
Yeah. Let's finish up talking about this defense. And when I say defense, I mean special teams. Because it felt like we were punting a lot. Kenneth Gainwell on kick returns had 4 kick returns for 100 yards, 25 average, actually not that bad. Calvin Austin 1 punt return for 14 yards. Chris Boswell, perfect on the day. Boz for president, 2 for 2 on field goals. Unfortunately, that was our only points. So that kind of sums that up. And then Corliss Waitman, I thought actually had a really good game. And just briefly, 6 punts for 273 yards, 4 of them inside the 20. Going back briefly to us talking about how the offense really didn't help the defense. On that one turnover where that was a fumble, interception, whatever you want to call it, it wound up being a fumble. And then we punted it away. That punt was fielded at the 8-yard line. Yeah. So we got them down inside the 8, and then they drove 92 yards, and then the offense came out and did a 3-and-out again. So Corliss Waitman did the best he could, and I was actually very proud of him in the punting game. But just unfortunate that the offense really didn't help out special teams or the defense. So that was very, very unfortunate. But now it's time to kind of transition. Oh, wait, go ahead, James.
One last guy on special teams I don't want to gloss over. Another big game out of Ben Skowronek. He had 3 tackles again in this game. And dang near made it into the All-Pro voting. He was like number 3 in All-Pro voting, so almost made it there. But great game out of Skowronek in coverage units.
And just like that guy on TikTok who likes to say, as the Cleveland Browns, punts, we like to say, when we head down to the Edinburgh Hotel bar.
Wow.
That's a fact. Support for Steelers by the Lake is provided by the Edinburgh Hotel Bar, serving a variety of lunch and dinner specials every day, including steak, seafood, Italian pasta dishes, and more. They're located at 100 Meadville Street in downtown Edinburgh. Information is available at 814-734-5103 or online at edinburghhotelbar.com.
Yeah,
punts. I mean Edinburgh Hotel Bar.
Yeah. It's a great place that I will not be eating as frequently anymore. But do love the Edinburgh Hotel Bar. Great place to go. Pat, unfortunately, was at the game. I haven't talked to him since. I didn't want to message him while I knew he was there. So now it's time to transition. Now that we got that unfortunate game out of the way. The big news of the day is Mike Tomlin stepping down and stepping away as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And like James has said multiple times, there's probably going to be a lot more turnover that is involved with that. But I want to go around and get everyone's reactions to this because this is very, very, very big news. And so, James, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that no one should be surprised, in my opinion. You have to have more success than what we've been having. And the frustrating thing is, regular season wise, he's one of the most successful coaches in the history of the game. In Pittsburgh Steelers history, he's tied for most wins with Chuck Noll in the history of all Pittsburgh Steelers coaches. So the success was there. You know, he went to the Super Bowl 2 times, won it once, 2 times in a 3-year span. Was a very good run there, and then it fell off, and he was just never able to put it back together. And unfortunately, the last few years is what people are going to remember him for a while now, and probably not so much the peak years where they were as dominant as they were. People aren't going to talk about, you know, the 5-year stretch where they led the league in sacks under his tutorship. That's just not going to be what they remember. They're going to talk about not getting a playoff win in the last 8 years. But that's what it comes down to, is you can't have no success period in the playoffs and expect to keep your job. That's why Mike stepped down, and he didn't wait to see if he was going to get fired or not. Honestly, I don't think the Rooneys were going to fire him, just because financially it didn't make any sense to do so. By Mike Tomlin stepping down, his contract is no longer fully guaranteed. So they don't have to pay him his $10 million plus whatever it is that he's making a year as one of the most tenured. Well, he was the most tenured head coach in the entire NFL. So to me, it's an unfortunate thing, but you had to feel like even the most staunch Tomlin defenders, which I probably would fall pretty close in that category, has to admit that it just wasn't successful enough. I knew going into this game, if Pittsburgh didn't win that playoff game, chances were really good that was it for them. So, man, was I hoping they were going to win that playoff game just to buy them a little more time to have one more year to try to find that quarterback and turn things around. But unfortunately, I think not being able to find that quarterback to replace Ben Roethlisberger was part of his downfall. But too many issues. In year after year, you know, we talk about the struggles in the playoffs, and they're serious. These games have been bad. This was the first time Pittsburgh actually kept it competitive through the first 3 quarters. The trend more recently was it got out of control right out of the gate. Then the team rallied. They tried to make it close, but they were down too much to make it in the end. This game was the complete opposite script of that. You know, they got the lead first for once. I don't know when the last time was they got the lead first in a playoff game. They kept it close. It was 7-6 at the end of the third quarter. But the game ended 30-6, and that's all anyone's going to remember from this. It goes to speak a lot about the character of Mike Tomlin, that all of his players stuck up for him after the game and said, this isn't on him, it's on us. People are going to blame him. It's not his fault. We got to play better. And a large number of guys played their worst games of the season in this game. But in the end, a good leader takes that responsibility and says, hey, we didn't win, and that starts with me. Are there other people involved in it? Absolutely. You know, it's coaches, it's players. Everybody didn't do a good enough job. But the guy at the top has to take ownership of the fact that it just isn't good enough. And that was it, you know, for the guy that the plaque is on the wall outside of the locker room. It says right there, the standard is the standard. The standard he set just wasn't getting hit anymore. So I understand why they had no choice but to do it.
Yep. Bill?
Me next. Well, I will probably mirror a lot of the sentiments that James was saying, but I'm not gonna lie, I was like a little emotional about it. Like I've been thinking about like when I really started to get into football, and like where like I remember actually having interest in a lot of it is like the end of Cowher and starting with Tomlin. And so realizing like I haven't watched Steeler football without Tomlin for over half my life. So that's like, and now I'm like, and now it's so much unknown. Like we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. We don't know who maybe 50% of our roster will be. We don't know if our OC or D. I hope they're gone, but like, yeah, not sad that they would be leaving, but it's a lot of those unknowns, and I'm like, this can be really exciting or it can be really scary because I feel like as a Steeler fan, we want it both ways, and at some point something has to give. So we want this change. We want to win a playoffs. This is serious. We cannot win a playoff game. It's pitiful, and that's what we want to win. But I fear that we're going to have some really terrible seasons coming up in order to eventually get that. And so just making sure that like the fan base stays loyal through the thick and the thin, it's just not the mediocre, and we win some, and we make the first round of playoffs. I don't think we'll make playoffs next year. I don't even think we'll have a winning season next year. Those are a lot of bold statements to make right after a tough loss like that. But when you're basically going to clean house, it could go really well. It could also go really poorly. So I feel like it's just a weird unknown now sitting here with like potential to be really great, but potential for it to get really muddy first. I mean, I wasn't Tomlin's number one supporter, but there were aspects of his coaching that I admired in the fact that he was a player's coach, that coming from being a coach, I feel like I can relate, at least on the outside, because we all know, me and Tom are best here. We talk all the time about our coaching styles, it's just daily conversation, really. But I feel like I can empathize with, anybody who's a coach can empathize, like the decisions you have to make, how, like, and at that level, what he's doing and how he sticks up for his players and how they all talk so highly of him, no matter what. I feel like is something I hope that the next coach that steps into this role would bring, like advocates for their players, but also does what they need to do to get the job done. Because unfortunately, yes, he's had a lot of wins and we really love that, but it hasn't taken us any further than the first round of playoffs as of late. So we all saw it, like it was there as soon as we knew we lost. I'm like, well, tomorrow will be interesting. Are we firing him? I didn't think we would fire him, but I was like, is something going to? I was like, at least maybe the OC and the DC will get fired. That'd be great too. Like, even if we don't fire Tomlin, but I think it's good that he took the chance, because I'm sure conversations were had. Those are things we'll never know about what him and Rooney's were talking about. But I think having that clean slate is probably better than keeping him and then like firing the OCs and like firing Smith and firing Austin but keeping Tomlin, because it's still the same. The trickle down effect is real. So if his leadership is still the same, it's going to have the same impact no matter who's in the locker room. And I feel like we've seen that. So definitely like emotional, but it needed to happen.
Yeah, so it's kind of bittersweet. For me being the younger one in the group, I remember the Cower Super Bowl, but growing up, my family wasn't really like a huge football family. Like, yeah, we watched the Super Bowl, but to me as a kid, it was like, ooh, cool, mom's bringing out the fun snacks now. And we got like the football blanket out on the floor. It wasn't really like I got more into football later in life, but the Tomlin Super Bowl was the one that I really remember the most. And so that was when I really started getting really into it and watching the James Harrison return. And those are the moments that started me into football. And so I had always been a Steelers fan because other members of my family were, but my immediate family wasn't big into football. So I got into it more later on in life. And that was kind of the football moment for me of man, wow, that was such a crazy, seeing that play in real time was the football beginning for me. Not truly, but what got me seriously into it. So the Steelers, for most of my football experience, have been associated with Tomlin. So to see, and I mean, that makes sense. He was the longest tenured head coach in the NFL. He had winning seasons every year. You know, he was the Steelers for a while for me. But that level of success was a modicum of it that wasn't enough to elevate the team to continued success, and wasn't bad enough to get us to a point where we could then reset. And to have that coach that elevates those players to that he's a player's coach and he can raise players that aren't as good to a level that they otherwise wouldn't have reached. But that level's never going to be that upper echelon that gets you to the win. And it's also not going to be that low that gets you like a 1-year reset to get you a stud player in the draft or something along those lines. And then a lot of the guys that he brings in, for example, like we mentioned before, some of the guys who are past their prime because they're a big name, or young quarterbacks, or quarterbacks that were a high draft pick that might then be like Mitch Trubisky was I believe the first overall pick one year, thinking that maybe he would be something, and then drafting Kenny Pickett because he was familiar with the stadium and all that kind of thing. Just wasn't ever able to develop a quarterback because he had always had Ben. And granted, defensive-minded head coach. Is he going to go down as one of the greatest coaches of NFL history? I believe so. He achieved things that other people could only dream of achieving. He is a Super Bowl winning head coach. But the time just kind of got past him. He's a bit more of an old school guy, and the Rooneys are a bit more of an old school ownership. So hopefully they're okay with bringing in something new. But seeing over and over again, just kind of the same thing after a little while, because it started out great and then just sort of kind of fizzled for a while. And as a spoiled fan base with 6 rings, we're quick to jump and say, Tomlin was the problem. He was part of it. And hopefully what we see in the future will be a little bit less of the growing pains that we're probably going to experience, because it's going to probably be a little while before we're back to what we as Steelers fans expect. But the hope is that this change is good and that it kicks off further changes and is able to then build, and momentum can come. And in order to get those high draft picks, you do have to stink. So we might see a few years of 3 or 4 wins. But then hopefully that returns on the investment of being able to get some higher caliber young players to then build a roster from and move forward. So wishing Coach T nothing but the best. You know, he was a character guy too. So he was a leader for the city, not just for the team. So hopefully whatever other coach comes in is integral to that portion of things as well. You always hear stories of him, you know, doing things for players that other coaches might not even think about doing. So we wish him the best. I hear a rumor that he's planning on doing media for a year. So that's going to be hilarious to hear Tomlinisms throughout various NFL games, if that does end up taking place. But yeah, it was time for a change. And after what we witnessed last night, I'm glad that Tomlin sort of did it on his own terms and said, I'm going to take this step back. And that it wasn't any sort of bad blood, because it does, from what we've heard thus far and from his statement, it doesn't seem like it was a Rooney decision. It seems like it was a Tomlin decision. So hopefully all of that is still good relationship between the two, and hopefully Coach T is around the league still for a while.
Yeah, I think I agree with all you guys in certain aspects, and especially Nick when you talk about the spoiled fan base. In the time that I've been a football fan, I've seen Pittsburgh. The first year I was a fan, go 6-10 with Cowher, Maddox, Bettis, and Hines Ward, and then I've never seen a losing season since. And so I understand the spoiled nature at which I've been operating as a fan and as an arguably analytic with the podcast and stuff and watching things. I've never seen us finish last in our division. You know, I've never seen a team completely fall apart or we've seen players lose it and things like that, but I still feel like Tomlin led his team, like you said, Nick, with character. I feel like he's one of the coaches that if he coached high school football, people would ask you at the coffee shop, how's the team looking? And he'd be the type of guy that would answer, ask me in 10 years when I see where these men are in their lives. Like that's where it would matter to him. And I'm not saying he didn't care about the wins in his NFL career or anything like that. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But as someone who's on the opposite spectrum as James, who was probably very, very hard on Tomlin when maybe things weren't always his fault or whatever, it was a frustration, I think, and maybe this was a plus for him of like not seeing the Bill Cowher come out. Like Bill Cowher would yell at his guys, get in their faces, spit coming out. And I got to see what it looked like in my mind at the time growing up of what it's like for someone to correct their players live in action as it's going on. And I feel like we didn't see that with him, which was a respect thing probably to his players. And I have no ill will towards Tomlin. Man, I hope he has a good career with whatever he does next. And part of me hopes he gets back into coaching. Maybe he needs some time away and then he gets to come back and perform better than he did with a different team or with us again, whatever. However it works out. And I will add this is I think there's a little bit of humility and even a touch of a different kind of respect. The fact that he's retiring, being tied with Chuck Noll, he knows dang well he could come back one more year and easily take over as the most winningest head coach in Steelers history. But he decided to nod his head and step back now. So there's a little bit more of respect I think I have for him than I did before, which I did respect him before, but man, it's gonna put a lot on the on my stress levels as I watch Steelers football in the upcoming years. And but that's fine. It's gonna be part of the story, part of the thing, and we will figure it out. But I think now it's a good time to maybe transition to talk with you guys about, do you guys have any ideas or any thoughts on who should be the next head coach?
One key thing I want to say, Tomlin did not retire. He stepped away,
Yeah.
which means we retain the rights to his contract. So if he does end up trying to go to another team within the next 2 years, it's got to be a trade, which means we get something back in return. So that's actually a huge plus in us not firing him and him stepping back, that if somebody else wants him, we're getting something in return, which if it's anything like Sean Payton's deal, which you figure it probably would be with how high caliber of a head coach Tomlin is, the Saints got a first and a second for him. So you figure we should probably be getting pretty solid return if anyone's trying to poach Tomlin within the next couple of years.
Rumor has it he's looking to take a year off. If that's true, next coaching cycle, 2027, he would definitely be the number one candidate for pretty much every team that's looking for a head coach. And a lot of these teams are getting rid of their head coach every single year because they're just bad every single year. So I would expect him to be a hot commodity. And if that's the case and things play out like we're kind of expecting, this upcoming draft class does not look like the class to get your quarterback in. You could be in a situation where Pittsburgh has 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders and all the ammunition you need to try to get your quarterback, thanks to Mike Tomlin, which would be the most ironic thing in the world.
That really would.
Because his lack of ability to find one might end up being the ammunition that gives us one.
Yeah, and you also have to remember, too, a lot of the number ones end up being misses. So it's not to say that you can't find a solid quarterback. Lamar Jackson was like pick 23. Josh Allen was, I believe, in the 20s as well. So a lot of these big-name quarterbacks that you think of, Patrick Mahomes was not the first overall pick. I want to say he was like 16. So
Brock
a lot
Purdy's
of these
still in the playoffs, and he was the dead last pick of the
Mr.
draft.
Irrelevant, Mr. Irrelevant. Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick, So any guy can end up being good if he's got the right mentality and he's an NFL caliber player. Because Tom Brady was overlooked for not being the most athletic guy, but he worked at it and he had a great football mind. And so, anything can happen. I'm not saying we're going to find the next GOAT in the 6th round. Will Howard please be the next GOAT?
Right.
But you never know. So it could be that Tomlin's picks that we get from him, if we do end up getting us the guy, but we also could A, have him on the roster already, or B, find a gem in amidst some of the later rounds. So I know Kenny Pickett didn't turn out to be that, but it's not the general rule, it's the exception to it. So
So on your question, Cody, with the who would we like to see for the next head coach, I don't have a specific name because this is all too new, but I would like to see the next head coach be an offensive-minded coach. Through my entire fanhood, it's been defensive-minded coaches, and I'm 46 years old. So that would be a welcome change, is to see somebody who's got more of that offensive-minded thing, because then you got two guys, your offensive coordinator and your head coach, who can really kind of try to come up with creative ways of getting your offense more explosive, more chunk plays, really taking advantage of mismatches that you have. So that's my number one thing. I really don't care if it's a 35-year-old guy or if it's a 55-year-old guy or whatever. I don't care if it's the first female head coach. As long as it's somebody that's an offensive-minded person, bring him in. Bring him in, because you never know. I mean, the whole reason we ended up with Mike Tomlin is because we gave a small-time position coach a chance. And he interviewed better than all the guys that were favorites. Mm-hmm. That worked out pretty doggone good. So interview everyone, cast a wide net, give everybody a chance. But I would love to see an offensive-minded guy just to get things a little more creative on offense.
Little shout out. Oh,
Nick,
no, go ahead. Little shout out to Locked On Steelers from earlier today, because they were live streaming, as they often do when big news breaks, and they were going through the different hiring timelines for the previous head coaches, and most of them were hired within like the second to last week of January. So we very well may see a hiring here within the next week or so. So I'm excited to see who that might be. And they were also discussing how Tomlin had been contemplating stepping away at the beginning of this season, before the season even started. So I have an inkling that the Rooneys have been doing their homework. Khan's been kind of, probably a big part of that process as well. Con artisting as he does. But, I have a feeling that they've been doing their homework already. So we will probably see some news coming out soon. Not that I don't want them to do their due diligence. I just have a feeling that they've been started on that for a while now. That being said, someone had thrown out the idea, and I don't think it'll happen, of Brian Flores as head coach and Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator, which I think would be really fun to see. But I don't think that's going to happen. I've heard a lot of names being tossed around. There was talk of Freeman, the coach from Notre Dame, stepping away, especially because shortly after Tomlin announced that he was stepping away, Freeman announced that he was going to be holding a presser tomorrow. I have a feeling that has more to do with the allegations that were brought against Freeman. If you're a college football person, there was a bit of a alleged battery incident. So Schefter, I believe, posted that Freeman intends to return to Notre Dame, so that all that is most likely noise. I'm just throwing out the things that I've heard, but I've heard a lot of talk about there's a Shula that's out there who has connections to Chuck Noll that people are saying might end up being brought in. I agree with James. I would like to see an offensive coach, but if we can't get an offensive coach, I wouldn't mind the idea of Flores if we can get a solid offensive coordinator underneath him. What he's done with the Vikings defense this year was pretty impressive, I thought. He has the ties to Pittsburgh already, so it wouldn't be really a difficult thing for him to come in and start being able to do what he did. It might retain some of the players who might otherwise think of potentially hanging it up or stepping away if they've got a guy that they're a little more familiar with, who they might have some respect for, stepping into that role. Especially because when you get a new guy in there who's trying to do new things, a lot of the time that results in more turnover, less of the old guard returning, trying to get their guys in. So if you can get a guy like Flores who might be a little more willing to work with the guys that are already there than try to turn everything over at the start, you might see some of those guys stick around. And I believe he runs a scheme that would work pretty well with your Alex Highsmiths, your Nick Herbigs of the world. So that could be an easy transition, in my opinion. So Flores is one of the names that I've heard that I would not be upset by if we don't get an offensive-minded head coach.
Okay, great. I also am in the same boat of I don't exactly know because the news was so shocking. I mean, again, we've all thought of this, and I was just willing that we were going to win this game so I didn't have to think about it anymore, or at least until a later date. But I feel like because both Tomlin and Cowher, they were position coaches, right? And
Correct.
so I think I'm with you, James and Nick, about wanting somebody who's offensive minded. I'm skeptical saying that just because our identity has been the steel curtain with the steel defense. And so I want somebody who still will encapsulate that. But I think my preference would be somebody who has not been a head coach in the NFL. And that might be a hot take, but I'm countering a little bit of what you said, Nick, of where I feel like if it's somebody who does not have that head coach experience, it's not I'm bringing my practices from my prior team and it's going to just now be like cut and paste with this team. Of course, there's changes. That's how that works. But I feel like if it's somebody who is new to the position, they're creating their position around what is around them, if that makes sense. It's not like I was a head coach for the Cleveland Browns. So I'm going to take whatever I was doing there and I'm just going to do it here with the Steelers. I don't want that. I'd rather have somebody who's new, like maybe, offensive coordinator or like linebacker coach, quarterback coach, whatever you may have. And they're coming to the position and it's like, this is a new position for me. I'm creating this now new with the people that are involved in the room. And it's not a old trying to fit into old and it's just not going to work. It's two coming together to create something new. So I think my preference is, and that might be the hot take, but I don't want a prior head coach. I want somebody who is new to the head coach position.
I forgot the one thing I wanted to say about the offensive head coach that I'm hoping for. And Jill is the one who reminded me of it with her take. I want someone who will be able to develop a quarterback.
Yeah.
Because that's been a huge problem for Pittsburgh for years on years on years since Ben, and even Ben being there for too long. We've had a problem with holding on to players for too long because we want them to be a Steeler for life, which I understand that notion. Like we want those players to be our players for forever. But like that kind of played into Ben being here a little too long and then not having a replacement. Like if you're going to have that player for that long, find a guy to be underneath them for a year or two to learn and then have that guy be the guy. So somebody who will be able to develop a quarterback is, I think, key.
So you're saying like how Derek Carman can be the next Cam Hayward. Right.
Yeah.
I get it. I see what you're
Yeah, exactly. Exactly like that.
Yeah.
And I think that was the goal with Mason Rudolph. It just didn't pan out like that,
Yeah. I think to share my final thoughts on this before we send it out, and then obviously if you guys are watching or listening, please feel free to comment your thoughts. I'm with James and I'm with a lot of you guys. I would love an offensive minded head coach. Brian Flores is a awesome name that would be very fun as well, and I think would even take that defense to another level. The big thing for me, and this was addressed to me earlier, a buddy of mine was like, is the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach opening even that attractive to people right now? And I'm like, absolutely. It is a legendary franchise, prestigious. The owners are great. The one downfall is probably the rooms and the locations we use. Yeah, we go to Latrobe. We go to an old college for training camp. Yeah, we don't have the newest and greatest state-of-the-art, training facilities. but it's a stable community. It's a big fan base. And then beyond that, you know that you're going to have a job for a while. Like Pittsburgh doesn't fire coaches. You're going to be able to come in with an almost completely new offensive scheme, like James was saying, where your offensive coordinator is probably out the door. You're probably going to bring in your own new quarterback, young quarterback, rookie quarterback, if you can develop him. It's a very intriguing opportunity for anyone who wants to be a head coach in the NFL. I'm just hopeful that part of me, like Joe was saying, I don't want to bring in a guy that's been set up as a head coach already, because I feel like they're going to come in with that mindset of, I'm going to do what I was doing somewhere else, and with this team, it's going to work. It's not exactly how it works. I'm not saying it won't work, but I want someone to come in with new ideas and really an excitement for this passionate fan base. I mean, the four of us being on here is just a very, very small fraction of how passionate this fan base is. And so I'm very hopeful for the new head coach, and excited to see this process. And I need these three lovely people to keep me in check when I turn into negative Nancy. So it's gonna be an interesting time this upcoming season and the seasons prior. So Nick, why don't you go ahead and set us out of here?
Hey, we can't thank you enough.
Before you
Wait,
do,
James
yeah.
got a thought.
Yeah, the wrecking balls.
Yeah, so we do have to hand out. We normally give out game balls. This week we decided, based off of how things just kind of got absolutely demolished in this game, that a wrecking ball might be a little bit more appropriate. So we gave the shout outs to the guys that played well as we did this show. But wrecking balls for the game. I'm going to jump in here just and be selfish. and it's going to be Brandon Eccles for me. Brandon Eccles, an absolutely atrocious game for him. I thought he had a pretty good season overall, but in this game got owned by Christian Kirk, and that was a big difference in this game. Christian Kirk just seemed unstoppable somehow, and a lot of that falls on the cleats of Brandon Eccles. So he gets my wrecking ball for kind of destroying things for us in this game.
My wrecking ball, to no one's surprise, is going to Johnny Smith. -1. That's all I have to say.
Nick?
Yeah, I don't want this to be a reflection on how I feel about the player overall, but on the performance in this game. I'm giving mine to Troy Fautanu. I think overall his season was fantastic. It's basically his rookie year. But with the way he went out and performed in this game, I don't think I can justify not giving it to him, especially since Jonnu Smith was already off the board, and that was the guy I wanted to give mine to. We're gonna go with Fautanu, just because the way he was beaten so often led to a lot of the issues we had in this game. So I thought like Frazier and McCormick were playing relatively well. Sayamalu got beat a couple times, but wasn't as bad as I thought Fautanu looked in this game.
Yeah. You guys took, I think, the three most obvious ones. If you thought of three players, like those are the three ones, so that's good. I feel like mine has to go, and this also doesn't change how I feel about the player. But it's been rough, kind of up and down all year long. It's gotta be DK. You missed some wide open opportunities downfield that really would extend drives and put us at least in field goal range to maybe change the way that the Texans would have played the game. Unfortunately, I got to give it to him. There's other receivers that we talked about that weren't really blocking or doing things that it also could have gone to, but those were game-changing moments and hands on the ball, and you still drop it. Unfortunately, that wrecking ball has to go to DK. So, James, you had something else before we go?
Yeah. I just wanted to let people know, for all those who are still watching and listening, we really appreciated the listenership. The viewership has been through the roof for us this season, and we appreciate every single one of you. We do go all season long for the new listeners, the new viewers. We're going to cut it down to once a week. We're going to try to come up with some creative things. Maybe we'll do some YouTube shorts for you to fill some stuff in between. Typically, we go on the weekends, and most of the time it's going to be Saturdays, most likely, as it works best for the four of us on our schedules combined. So we're going to try to continue that, including this upcoming weekend, as we're going to have a seasonal review to do, and we'll keep on keeping you in the loop on what's going on in the playoffs too. But there's going to be a lot to figure out as far as, what are we still going to get out of these compensatory draft picks? We needed to know because playing time had a lot to do with that, and a lot of these guys didn't play as much as we were hoping. So we'll keep you in the loop as the season goes on. So don't quit on us, because we're going to have your coverage. We might have some lean years in front of us, and you might need us even more than before.
Mock draft mania on its way, baby. I can't wait. And speaking of can't wait, we can't thank you enough for listening to us here at Steelers by the Lake. Please, if you would, give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Subscribe, ring the bell. It doesn't cost you a thing. Don't forget the 5-star reviews. Make all of us, especially James Strong, very happy. And until next time, this is all of your co-hosts, Cody, James, Jill from Ohio, and Nick Pretzel signing off.
Peace.
Now it's time.